Live remark.
Yeah. Hey, welcome back to the 2019 SNS College Football Podcast. This episode, we are previewing Notre Dame and its awkward stepbrother, the ACC Conference, so it should be exhilarating. But we have already previewed the Big 12, Pac-12, and the SEC so far, so if you guys haven't seen those, check them out. Those were actually, there's a lot of good info in them. I think we had a couple unanimous picks as far as who we thought were going to win the conferences. But as always, we start with a little recap of the conference. We'll add in Notre Dame, obviously, and then we'll get into some coaching changes. So, Addison, if you want to give a quick recap of the ACC conference last year, any surprises? What all happened?
There were some surprises. I mean, you had Florida State really tanking last year. The Coastal, as usual, was very surprising. It was the sixth different team in 6 years to win the division.
Wheel of mediocrity.
Pitt, just to tell you something about the Coastal, how mediocre it was. Pitt won the division, and they finished 7-7 on the year. And how bad they lose to Clemson in the championship? It was bad, whatever it was.
Bad, yeah.
So, just a lot of mediocrity in that division. In the other division, Clemson was pretty dominant all year. Syracuse was a surprise team that finished second in the division and actually had Clemson on the ropes early in the season at Clemson.
Yeah.
If they had won that game, they would have won the division.
Yeah,
Clemson
made the playoff.
But in reality, Clemson was way better than everyone in this conference, and obviously dominated their way to national championship.
Yeah. Steele, do you want to give a quick recap of Notre Dame last year? I mean, you don't have to, but
You should first welcome me. My first appearance of
that's a good
2019.
point. Yeah, he hasn't been on air on camera, so yeah, your first appearance.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you. Dad duties.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess that's important, but yeah, Notre Dame last year. Obviously, you and I picked them correctly to make the playoff, and then
We both did so, thinking Brandon Wimbush was going to be the quarterback.
So I don't know if that's good or bad, but they did make the playoff. Obviously, they had not the best showing against Clemson, but really nobody did. Go ahead.
Yeah, quick recap would be Clark Lee inherited a really good defense. So transitioning into this year, we'll see what he's able to do with a couple key players. Losing from 2018. Not sure how much they're going to be able to rely on the D. Quarterback transition from Wimbush to Ian Book. Obviously there was a decision made there from BK and the staff, kind of seeing what limitations Wimbush had, and then getting into Book just kind of amplified the offense in the passing game. I think generally speaking, for what people predicted them to do last year, they overachieved. Like you said, we predicted them going undefeated and getting into the playoff, and kind of rightfully so, with the type of schedule they had and who they beat. And then we both agreed that they weren't going to beat Clemson or Bama, or both of them.
Right.
So they, I would say exceeded expectations in some facets, but in some ways, they were right where we kind of thought they would be.
Sure.
So, but yeah, as far as 2018, good season.
Yeah.
Better to be there than not.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, Clemson they were on a rampage, a warpath. They're just not going to be beat. So
yeah, I mean, they played well for a quarter. It was close.
Right.
Julian Love got hurt, and then talent took over, and then there you go.
Clemson was really good. And
you could blame the loss on that injury.
I'm going to.
it's like when OSU lost to Florida, we blamed on Ted Ginn.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously the game would have been different.
Right.
But,
Ted Ginn would have scored 10 touchdowns.
Well, he just would have had 7 kickoff returns.
Yeah.
He never would have had to be on offense.
Yeah.
So Troy Smith never would have gotten sacked. So come on. Some easy little recaps there. But next we will transition into the coaching changes, and there are 3. Is that right, Addison? In this conference, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina. So let's start with Louisville. They were really bad last year. Easy team to bet against. They just quit on Petrino at one point. I don't even know who the coach was when didn't he get fired in season, or did they wait for the end of the season? Yeah.
I don't remember.
I don't know.
Who cares?
I think he was gone mid-season.
Yeah, they quit on him. They got routed at the end by a lot of bad teams, and They bring in Scott Satterfield from Appalachian State, who, I mean, he did well there. I don't know a ton about him, but I do know that Louisville needed a change. So, Addison, do you have any specific thoughts about this? Do you know a whole lot about Satterfield? Do we care?
He's done all right at App State.
Right.
So, I mean, they've been pretty solid last few years.
Yeah.
But besides that, I don't really know much about him or, like, his
style
of
defensive mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, he's coaching Louisville, who plays Notre Dame week 1. So I've done
a
little bit of homework on him and what he's going to try to bring.
an area where Louisville needs to improve a lot.
Yeah,
Which is everywhere, but especially on D.
He has his work cut out for him, like a complete overhaul, like a mentality and program change.
Right.
Where a lot of times you saw Louisville defenders either out of place or even just quitting in the middle of plays.
Yeah.
With how many points they gave last year was just absurd. So he has his work cut out for him. Could he be successful there? It depends what your definition of successful is.
I mean, he won't be this year because they stink.
Yeah.
And Juwan Puma-Pass is still their quarterback, and he's god awful. So I think he'll get them back to where
they could. Corey's calling it. Yeah, they could routinely win.
I have like no battery.
I got a long charger here. We good?
Oh, we're good then.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Corey from Denver joining the ever so exhilarating ACC and Notre Dame preview. How are you tonight, sir?
Oh, I'm ecstatic here. We're talking about the best conference in all the country, so.
Clearly.
We were panicking a little bit when you weren't responding.
Oh yeah, sorry, I lost track of time a little bit. But yeah, I didn't want to miss this for the world.
So, to bring you up to speed, we recapped the conference from last year. Kind of boring. We recapped Notre Dame, also boring. We're talking about the coaching changes within the conference right now. So we just went over.
They're being sour, Corey. Both of them.
We are? Wait, how are we being sour?
You're just mad that you have to talk about the ACC and Notre Dame.
Oh, I'm not mad. I'm excited. I can't wait. There's particular things I want to point out about Virginia Tech's defense last year, so it'll be fun.
Continue.
So now we're talking about the 3 teams or programs, whatever, that made coaching changes. We're on Louisville right now with Scott Satterfield.
Corey, do you remember, did Petrino make it through the entire season, or did they fire him mid-season?
I don't recall him being fired mid-season, but it wouldn't shock me if he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Okay. We just couldn't
Anyway,
remember.
so yeah, well, we can wrap up
He was
that.
fired.
We think,
He was fired.
I don't know. I mean, Louisville's got to be better than what they were. I don't think they're going to be good. Puma-Pass is terrible. The defense is probably going to be terrible. We're not going to preview these teams quite yet. We're going to go into the next couple of coaching changes. So the second one we'll get into is going to be Georgia Tech, and they are moving from longtime Steel favorite Paul Johnson, triple option,
yes, sir.
to what I would assume is I think in the spring game I saw them first play. They lined up as a joke in like the wing tee or whatever, and then they spread out to 5 wide. So Jeff Collins comes in from Temple. He seemed to be pretty solid there. I also do not know a lot about him though.
Jeff with a G, right?
I think Jeff with a G. Yeah,
So,
I think.
Or, you mean
Geoff.
Yeah, Geoff Collins. So, Corey, do you have any ACC insider info on Jeff Collins, or do you know a lot about him? Do you care?
The only thing I kind of know about him is that he has Georgia Tech and Atlanta roots, and by like all intents, I guess he's just trying to make it more of like a come to Hotlanta type of deal. So he's like getting rappers to like promote the university, which is a new angle for Georgia Tech. So we'll see how it works out.
Are you happy to see Paul Johnson gone?
I'm most happy. Literally like the most. He's the most frustrating man alive.
All right, well, we'll get into probably what will be a 10-second preview on Georgia Tech later, but we're going to go to the last coaching change, maybe saving the last for the best for last is what I was trying to get to. Yeah, Mac Brown, back in college football after a pretty long hiatus, I think. Obviously, he was Texas head coach, won a national title because of Vince Young. Mac did coach here, what was it, 80... Oh, Phil's got this written wrong. 88 to 87. That's odd.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Apparently he was jumping back in time, but
till like 90s.
Yeah, Mac, though, has been a head coach for, 30 years? That's a long time. I didn't realize. Well, anyway, North Carolina's got 14 returning starters. Mac I don't know if I would call it is rejuvenating the program. I don't know. I haven't really heard a whole
With his
lot
like
about
75.
it. I mean, yeah. Do we know, anybody can answer this, is he trying to pull the same shit as Herm Edwards? Is he going like coordinator, like make like big time CEO, let the coordinators do it? Or
who are the coordinators listed?
I don't know. That's a good question. We got
Scott? No, that's
Phil Longo, who guided
Longo from Ole Miss and some dude from Army. The D coordinators from Army.
Yeah, Bateman or something. So I don't know. I mean, what do we?
No,
okay,
no,
here I'll ask you this: Is Mac gonna make these guys?
He's gonna be a better coach than Larry Fedora.
Well, Larry Fedora's trash.
Like I mean, whether how long he's there, I mean that's
every publication last year had North Carolina as a division contender, and this podcast said incorrect. That team is going to suck ass, and they did, and that's why Larry Fedora got fired. I mean, do we think Mac is going to make this team a consistent Coastal Division contender, or are they just going to be?
He's going to be there less than 5 years.
Oh, I agree because he might die before.
Yeah, for one reason or another, I don't think he's going to last very long.
Yeah,
Corey, that's your division. What do you think about Mac being there? Is that going to make North Carolina like any more relevant, or are they just going to be kind of middle of the road like usual?
I think that Mac Brown is going to pull some like blue chip recruits. They're going to have this sexy, like, come to UNC. It's kind of like they seem to do this like every 4 or 5 years. They got like, Butch Davis did a little while ago where they infused this like, we've got this cool brand name, but we're really a basketball school. So they pull talent, but then they continue to suck. So I don't really see them as being a legitimate, consistent contender. I mean, they might throw like a year, the next couple of years where they're winning 9 games and maybe even win the division, but that's not saying a lot.
Yeah.
The cycle seems to be with this program is they finally get some like, I don't know, like talented guys in, and then they all get suspended, and then the coach is gone.
Yeah, it seems like at North Carolina, which I think it's actually like a good school, but the athletes don't really seem to go to school. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But we will move on now.
Other people do the school for them.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it seems like. So we're going to move on now to the 2019 previews. We're going to start with Steele's Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, we recapped them last year. They had an undefeated regular season. Didn't have such a great game against Clemson, but like we said, nobody really did except for Syracuse. Steele, I'm going to hand it over to you. This is your team. Give us just kind of general breakdown and your, I guess, outlook for them.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just watching sports.
Okay.
So they opened the season with the recapped or semi-recapped Louisville team that we just talked about. So they should be able to get off on the right foot, at least in terms of scheduling, with a couple of easy wins.
Well, you need that bye week going into New Mexico week 3. So.
Right. And then that leads me to the hardest game on their schedule, and maybe one of the hardest games that anybody plays across the board, across the nation this year, going to Athens. And they also go to Michigan later in the year. So they've got 2 of probably the toughest road games that any team has, as far as, big name programs playing, 2, heavyweights, playoff contenders. I think my mentality is if they can split those and win the rest, they're going to be in the playoff talk again, whether they're sitting at 7, 6, or 5.
Yeah.
Or maybe, just barely on the outside looking in. It's obviously going to depend on how Georgia and Michigan do. But I think, they're going to be a double-digit dog going to Georgia, and that'll kind of get me into breaking down the actual aspects of this Notre Dame team. Is I think Georgia's just going to run it down their throat, because we all know that Georgia has a vaunted run game and good offensive line. And that's where Notre Dame's going to struggle, is up the middle on their defense. Their defense kind of got gutted in terms of nose tackle depth, losing Jerry Tillery, who is the man out in San Diego now, who is going to form a nice little defensive line with your guy Bosa.
Oh, yeah.
They've got a great D line.
Yeah. So
I think they moved to LA a few years ago, but
whatever.
San Diego.
Yeah, they don't win enough games to care about them.
Nobody. They play 16 road games
play
a
in a
year.
soccer
Yeah,
stadium.
exactly.
No, they do. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So they lost a lot of interior D linemen. They lost all 3 starting linebackers, and then Julian Love decided to go pro a year early. With all that being said, they actually returned quite a bit. They've got 3 or 4 defensive ends that are all going to play in the pros. They've got a really good cornerback in Troy Pratt Jr., who Corey knows about because we took him from Virginia Tech in a recruiting cycle, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a couple years back.
Brian Kelly wins another.
Yeah, always winning, always winning. They returned both of their safeties, who they're very high on, and they're actually really high on the 2 incoming freshman safeties that they brought in last year. Actually, he's a sophomore now, and then this year a 5-star in Kyle Hamilton. So they've got some depth there as well. So the cupboard's not bare, so to speak, but they need to find a body or 2 to fill the middle of the defense, or they're going to be just kind of run. Offenses are going to let the DNs run up the field, and they're going to run up the middle on them pretty much consistently until they prove that they can stop it. So that's going to be a glaring weakness, or at least an apparent weakness on defense until that's addressed, and you're going to see it week 3 at Georgia. How they attend to the running back there, and that's going to be a little scary task to handle. Offensively, I'm really high on them. We all know with the offense kind of went from sputtering to at least point production wise, quite a big jump when they went from Wimbush to Book. I think there's some question marks about his at least arm strength in terms of vertical passing. You're going to see more of that this year. They've got 3 or 4 receivers that they're pretty high on that are speedsters more so. So they're not going to throw as many like back shoulder fades or jump balls to Miles Boykin, who also left early. If he would have come back, I think they would have had a really, really fine offense. They only have to replace 1 offensive lineman, and that's in the center position. And they're already really high on Jared Patterson, and a player that got some playing time last year, actually a left tackle, and they've already switched him into center, and he's the presumptive starter there. They lose Dexter Williams, and they do have some depth issues at the running back position because they haven't recruited that well there for the last couple of years. Either some program fit type of issues or just air balls on some guys. They've got a couple guys coming in the 2020 and 2021 class, but obviously that doesn't help do them any good next year. So I think they're referred to as tight end U with all the historic good tight ends that they've had, and they're really high on a couple of them that they have this year. Pretty much in all 4 of the classes that they have, seniors all the way down to incoming freshmen. They think they have a contributor in one way or another, whether it's on the line or flexed out. So if Book can complete some passes down the field, a little bit longer pass game to ease on the run game, that would help a lot. But they're going to have a really good offensive line to run behind. Last year was actually a kind of a down year in terms of offensive line for Notre Dame, and they still were pretty productive. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, 2 really tough road games. If they can split them, one or the other, I think especially if they get the Georgia win, I think that's going to bode really well for them. But the Michigan game's a little bit later in the year, so losing the Georgia game might actually be, I guess, the better one to lose.
It seems like historically it's better to lose.
Yeah. I think they'll be in playoff contention. We'll obviously have another pod about playoff predictions, so to speak. So we'll see what Clark Lee, the defensive coordinator, is made of, because, like I said, he had a pretty stocked group to go into his first year last year. And did very well. So we'll see, types of adjustments or who they get to fill into the linebacker positions. And like I said, defensive tackle is the biggest concern.
Let me ask you this. So let's just say hypothetically they beat Georgia and Michigan. Which game do you consider, because these I think would be considered trap games, which one would you be more concerned about? Home against Virginia after you would beat Georgia, or home against Virginia Tech, who's off a bye, after you would beat Michigan, hypothetically? Which of those games would you be more concerned about?
Oh, that's a good question. They both suck, right?
I don't know. We'll get to Corey's team later, but I mean, I'm just asking you right now, which of those games do you think would be more of a trap game that you'd be concerned about?
Jill doesn't believe in trap games, apparently.
I don't believe in trap games against really shitty teams.
I would say at Stanford, last week of the season.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's not a bad
Stanford it does pretty well against you guys.
one. But in terms of
That's not the question.
Yeah.
Are you on gummies?
in terms of Nick's question, I would probably be more scared. I'd probably be more scared of Virginia because I think Notre Dame has recently lost to Virginia Tech, even though that was during the 4-8 season.
Yeah.
I think that could loom in terms of like recent memory bias, maybe.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I think you're a little bit more prepared for a team or a program that's beaten you in the last 3 years.
Sure.
Opposed to Virginia that they haven't.
Okay. All right, so we got a really good breakdown from Steele.
In-depth analysis.
In-depth on his team. Let's go to somebody that absolutely despises Notre Dame. Addison, what do you think about Notre Dame this year? What do you have to add as far as to what Steele said? Are they... I don't think you thought they were going to be a playoff contender last year. I thought you'd be, like, they might be in the conversation, but obviously you did not have them in the playoff. Obviously we're not giving our picks now, but do you think they are good enough to be a contender this year? What do you think?
Yeah, I think they're good enough. I probably wouldn't expect them to beat Michigan, but I think they can.
Yeah.
You know, and like Steele said, if they're a one-loss team, then they're obviously going to be in consideration.
Yeah.
Offensively, I expect like pretty similar to what they've done the last few years. I generally always like the O-line play that this program puts out, and they're probably still going to be, really good again. They got 4 starters back. Book and the receivers should be pretty good. They've got some receivers that probably Bill Belichick would be interested in.
Chris Fink.
Defensively, I think they'll be pretty good, but 2 key losses there with Tillery and Julian Love, like Steele mentioned. So you got 2 leaders you need to replace. So those are the biggest concerns to me defensively.
Okay. I guess I'll go real quick and then I'll let Corey go. I think they're going to be really – I think they'll be efficient on offense like they usually are. I think losing Dexter was a pretty big deal, but when you have 4 linemen back, that usually helps soften the blow a little bit. And Book, despite whatever shortcomings we think he has, he definitely was the reason that I think they excelled last year past what we thought they could be with Wimbush. But defensively, I am a little concerned that I like we've talked about before, I think their linebacker play in the middle of that line, there could be some teams that run it well that could give them a lot of problems. But, I think they are good enough to be a playoff team. This will be a little teaser, I guess, but, I think they're going to actually beat Michigan. But I'm not going to say what I think they're going to do otherwise until we get later into the playoff preview, whether I have them in or not. But yeah. So Corey, do you have anything you want to add about Notre Dame before we get into the ACC breakdown?
I don't have any specifics. I do think that they have a good shot of catching Michigan, right? And so the question to me is, what happens at the end of the year if they, let's say, play Georgia pretty tough and they're sitting at 11-1? I know everyone was like pounding the table even a little bit last year when they were undefeated, but I'd be curious to see them in the mix at 11-1 in the playoff talk. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting.
Seems like we're just assuming they're going to lose to Georgia.
Well,
Duh.
Georgia, we said it would be a double-digit favorite.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
They have to pull off a little something special. But let's move on now to the actual ACC breakdown, and we will start with
which one should we start with?
We'll start with, what do you want to start with? I'll let you pick.
Let's go with the Coastal. Now Corey's here. We can.
All right, we'll go to the Coastal. As Addison pointed out, 6 different champions in the last 6 years. So truly unpredictable a lot of the time. There's obviously going to be like teams that are favorites, but Pitt, like last year, none of us had Pitt winning. They decided to win. So
yeah, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, but let's start with, and we'll go in order of what Phil's got here, just because. We'll start with the Miami Hurricanes. So Mark Richt decided just to up and retire. That's probably a good thing because he's not a good coach, in my opinion. But Manny Diaz takes over. He was the DC. He actually was Temple's head coach for about, 6 days or something like that. And then Richt decided to step down. Miami decided to bring Manny back in. And I think they're trying to do kind of like what OSU's trying to do, what Oklahoma did with Lincoln Riley. They're trying to keep the transition, kind of minimal, but like keep a little chemistry in there. Manny's been known as a good defensive mind, but obviously last
Yeah, it's
year.
funny we didn't even mention him in the new coaches.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah,
We're
he's
here.
a new coach. We're here. He, last year they definitely underachieved. I'm going to point out that on last year's preview, I said that team would lose at least 4 games, I believe, and they lost 6. A lot of people had them in their top 10 last year, but Miami's been plagued by a while now by terrible quarterback play. They've had a lot of athletes on defense, a lot of stingy defenses, some good playmakers on offense, but O-line play has been pretty bad. Quarterback play has been worse. Corey, I'll start with you since this is your division, and I know you love this team. What do you think about the Canes this year? Are they as far as where they're ranked by most publications? Are they ranked correctly, or do you think they are underrated, overrated? Your thoughts?
I have them as the favorite in that division. So in terms of rating within the division, I think that Phil has them properly rated.
Okay.
I don't know what they're ranked nationally. I wouldn't put them, if they squeak into the 20 to 25 range preseason, that's not going to bother me. But if they're unranked, I think that's fair too, considering what they did last year. I just think they're head and shoulders above everyone in the division in terms of talent. Of course, I think the huge question is obviously not a surprise to anyone, is they're going to go as far as their quarterback play goes, and right now that's a huge who the hell knows. So,
right.
They have great skill. They have great skill guys. Their defense should be probably top 20 again. So I don't know. The big missing piece. A quarterback is very important. So it could be the difference between a 10-2 team. If you look at their schedule, if somehow they get past Florida, just take a look at their schedule real quick. I don't have it up in front of me, but it's very possible that this team could be 9-0, and then the full Miami, the U hype is back. That's going to be just at a fever pitch. And so
Sounds like 2 years ago.
yeah,
and it very well could. Their schedule's not difficult outside of that Florida game, and so I think that they're the team to beat in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, Steele.
Okay.
Go for it, man.
Miami?
Yeah.
Manny Diaz.
Yeah.
Yeah, not much to add there. I won't waste people's time. They need to find a quarterback from all accounts, and low lights from the first couple practices. It looks like they're struggling to pass the ball.
Yeah, it looks like the same shit.
So you're not going to, even with how shitty the Coastal is, you're not going to just win all of your games with a bad quarterback,
right?
At least at a Power 5 conference. So they need to solve that to do anything this year.
I think Addison and I can provide a little perspective on the quarterback competition. Tate Martell is, I think, a slight favorite in Vegas odd maker there. As far as being the starting quarterback.
Money.
By all accounts, according to OSU insiders, at least from what I read and heard from the last couple of years, Tate has a lot of trouble completing passes. And that is worrisome, I think, for Canes fans, because in Ryan Day's system, he sets up the quarterbacks for a lot of success. It's a very quarterback-friendly system. And if Tate cannot complete passes in practice, I have trouble thinking he can do it in real game environments when the going gets tough. Now, I think what gives him maybe a little bit of an edge is his legs. He is a good athlete. He's going to be able to gain some yards on the ground. But, Malik Rozier was able to do that a little bit. But they still couldn't complete passes down the field. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on Tate? I think you don't think of I think I dislike him more than you do. But is he possibly the answer for them, or are they still going to struggle through the air?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I always, from watching his tape in high school, I always thought he was a poor man's Johnny Manziel kind of.
Yeah.
Probably worse passing ability. He definitely likes to use his legs. He likes to just kind of wing things as he goes. Runs around a lot in the backfield, just trying to make plays. He is a good runner. So I don't really know, because we never really got to see him throw the ball that much at Ohio State, so we don't really know too much about that.
In limited action, he did pretty well throwing the ball. The problem was it was always in mop-up time. It was always against lesser opponents.
Yeah,
So
it's
we really
not
don't
really
know.
anything that you could evaluate in terms of how good he's going to be.
Right.
So quarterback is the biggest question, I'd say, on the team. Besides that,
I mean, I think. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I like their defense.
Yeah.
Their linebackers are like the most experienced linebacking core ever. They've all been starting since they were freshmen.
Yeah.
And they're all seniors now. They were doing like pretty good like record wise last year, and then they ran into a rough 4-game stretch where their offense really struggled last year. Lost all 4 of those games and really took them completely out of the the conversation.
Yeah.
So this year, I think they have a lot of potential to rebound. They in the division have the most talent. So if they can figure the quarterback thing out and get like more consistent offensive play, then they could be be back to being the favorite in this division. Like,
sure.
Obviously not expecting them to compete for the conference title, but
yeah. Well, I think the thing that sucks for them is like if they had a really strong offensive line, then maybe we'd feel a little more comfortable with, but they don't, I don't think. And so I think that makes it even more worrisome.
Yeah.
But
all these teams that we're talking about too are going to have a lot of flaws.
Well, they'll have deficiencies somewhere.
Yeah.
And and it's weird to me that Manny is a Florida State alum. Makes it kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we'll move on to the next program. It's going to be Corey's alma mater, Virginia Tech. They obviously, I think, underachieved.
Can you jump ahead to the Who's and come back in a minute? I have to run real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, we can go to Virginia. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna actually go to Virginia now. Team that actually overachieved a little bit last year, and there seems to be a lot of hype with Virginia, with Bronco Mendenhall's team this year. I see quite a few people picking them to actually win this division, and I mean, I think they are a contender, but still, since you gave the little call out, let's see what you think about Virginia this year. Your thoughts? The Who's. You've seen them play in person. What do you think?
I have.
Intimidating atmosphere in Charlottesville?
Not quite. not quite. So their quarterback is probably one of the most experienced and I would say best.
Yeah.
In the Coastal, which is probably why a lot of people are picking them to do, good things.
Sure.
Compared to what we were just talking about with Miami, saying, they're quarterbackless, and that's going to be, the determining factor. The schedule, it looks like they open up with a conference foe at Pitt on the road, which is going to...
It's an interesting game.
Yeah, I think it's going to...
Exciting.
Yeah, I mean, they're returning Coastal champs. They're going to be defending their honor. But I think with an out-of-conference game at Notre Dame and a couple other...
They've
got a huge game against Old Dominion.
Yeah, which we know is capable.
They are capable of beating teams in Virginia. They
Exactly.
might be
If
the
Old,
champion
if
of
Old
Virginia.
Dominion wins that game, they're just the best program in the
In
state.
Virginia,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very possible. So am I buying stock on Virginia football? Probably not.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, look, they obviously, quarterback play is good. I think where their deficiencies lie are in the playmakers. They have none. But their back seven, I think, is pretty strong. I think their D-line is supposed to be all right. So the defense overall should be pretty good under Bronco Mendenhall. But, when's the last time they beat Virginia Tech? I mean, it's been a long time.
15 straight, bro.
There we go. He's back. 15 straight games. It's kind of, okay, I don't want to say like OSU, Michigan, but it's on that level as far as if we're talking about Virginia winning this division, that's the team that they need to beat for once. And they play Virginia Tech at home on a Friday night, last game of the year. That could be possibly a de facto conference or division title game. It could. But Addison, before we go to Corey last on his Who's there, any additional thoughts besides what Steele had?
I think they're in the mix for the division. With the quarterback coming back and solid on defense, they'll be steady. I don't think the ceiling is very high. So, I don't really think they're as good as Miami, but if Miami falters again or they can't get good quarterback play, then it could fall into Virginia's lap. I know a lot of people are picking them, going into the year, probably just because of some of the experience they have coming back.
Sure.
Or maybe they're just, spinning the ACC wheel of destiny and it's just their turn. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much last year. Like you said, their offense, I don't really see it as explosive at all. So they kind of rely on their defense to play well, and offense do enough to win. So
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like the greatest recipe, to be honest.
Right.
Corey, so your thoughts on Virginia before we move on to your alma mater?
I think they could play good D. They should have. They have enough good pieces coming back. Although they do lose, I think their best defender, in my opinion, Thornhill, was kind of an in-the-box safety, and he was a do-everything type of guy. I mean, when they played Virginia Tech last year, he was all over the place. So I think losing him is people might not be giving that enough credit. But I think they'll be good enough on defense, and obviously Broncos had a history of coaching that side up. I do think that some of the I guess deficiencies on offense are being a little overshadowed simply by the fact that Bryce Perkins is coming back. Now they lost their leading rusher and they're basically their number one safety valve wide receiver. And I believe, you could check me on it, I think they lose 3 offensive linemen too. So there's a lot more weight being shifted onto Bryce Perkins' shoulders, and he wasn't what you call an efficient passer last year. So I don't know. I mean, I have some significant questions about whether or not they're going to be able to move the ball enough just to sustain. And it's not like they're replenishing people with legitimate talent. I mean, they were, I think they recruit like below in the 60s the last 4 years. And Broncos said last year that they had like 20 ACC caliber players. He knows that the depth is just not there. So I don't know. I think that they're getting a little too much hype, I think, in my book, but of course I'm biased.
Well, yeah, I question their both lines. I think both lines are going to struggle a little bit, and that's usually not good in football. So we'll move on to your program, though. If you want to kick it off with Virginia Tech, just if you want to give a quick recap, even though we kind of know what happened with them last year, but then what's your outlook for them this year?
Yeah, I mean, fresh off, I think literally the first losing season, 6-7 in the last like 25 years. It was Bud Foster's worst defense he's ever fielded at Virginia Tech, and he's been coaching there for 32 years. So yeah, a lot of room to go up. They return, I think, the 11th most production of anyone in the country, according to Bill C's returning production stats. I think in terms of starters, it's like 8 or 9, depending on how you want to quantify it on defense, and I think like 7 or 8, I think, on offense, so maybe 8. In any event, it's a lot. And they were playing a lot of young guys that had never played before last year, true freshmen, redshirt freshmen all over the field, particularly on defense, and it turned out to be pretty abominable. So I think everything's got to be looking up, I would think. It's the first year under Fuente that they've had, unless he gets hurt, a quarterback that should be their returning starter, at least a sustainable returning starter, and Ryan Williams. He was a former Kansas transfer. We like to joke about that. But he actually proved himself to be like fairly mediocrely good.
It's a compliment, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, on offense, I really do think they should take the lead in terms of carrying this team, ahead. But I do have my significant doubts about Fuente and his offense. I think at times it is just super predictable, ultra conservative, and it's like, at some point you gotta let these boys play. They do have some skill guys that I'm pretty excited about. Their 2 receivers are really good. They've got two tight ends that are back that are pretty good, and the running back situation has always been sort of a committee approach under Fuente. So I don't know, I don't expect them to have any studs in that rotation, but it might just be like a mash of a couple people contributing there. On defense, like I said, I mean, you would hope that Bud, now recently announcing he's going to be retiring after the year, would light a little fuse under those boys, and now everyone is no longer freshmen. They've got a year under their belt, and so there's really not the experience excuse anymore. So I'd like to think that, given Bud Foster's track record, that was probably more of an anomaly than it was a trend. So the optimist in me is like they're going to return to, at worst, something in like the 40s, maybe hopefully something better on defense. If that's the case, then they'll certainly be good enough against their schedule to compete for the division.
Okay. Addison, thoughts added on to what Corey's got?
Well, yeah, a lot back on D, obviously. very rough last year. I mean, Old Dominion threw all over Virginia Tech, and then Pitt and Georgia Tech ran all over. So,
yeah,
Corey, like, would you attribute what was going on last year? Was it just like inexperience, or what was going on with the defense? Do you think?
I would say, well, weak as hell up front. They suffered in that Old Dominion game. They one guy basically, he's now at Miami. His name's Trayvon Hill. He's a defensive end, starter for us. Probably the most talented defensive end on the team last year. He got sat down, I think, in the third quarter because he's a head case. And then after the game, there was a little scuffle in the locker room, apparently, between he and some of the staff members, and he was immediately booted from the team.
And then Miami, of course, picked him up.
And then Miami picked him up.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then they suffered a couple injuries. They had just they didn't have the depth, particularly in the middle. Defensive tackle, they're just weak up front. So I attribute that a lot to the running issues. Some of the inexperience, I guess, could come into play. They were starting a redshirt freshman and a true freshman linebacking tandem for probably 10 of the 12 games of the regular season. So I think you're having some issues with run fits, at least on the run defense. And then on the back end, you had a redshirt freshman and a true sophomore, I think, playing corner. And so yeah, I think a lot of it's probably inexperience, but also being weak and soft up front against the run was pretty bad too.
Yeah, and I just think the defense is obviously the biggest thing that you need to improve on. With so many guys coming back and Bud, working some of his magic, I think they can be a lot better than they were last year. So that's going to be the key.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go. I think they're going to be in the mix. I think the defense will definitely be a lot better. I don't know how good they'll be, but they can't be close to what they were last year. It wasn't like real life. So
yeah,
the one thing if we're talking about like them in Miami, it seems like that's the general consensus that we feel like those might be the two teams. Like we don't seem to be as high on Virginia. They seem to be in the mix in our minds, but Miami does get Virginia Tech at home, and Miami's off a bye. And I think it's not so much that it's in Miami because that's not a home field advantage, but it's just not at Lane Stadium. And I think that could be also another one of those games that's possibly the de facto division title game, just like we said Virginia and Virginia Tech could be. But, I mean, I think I agree with Corey. I mean, I think the offense is going to be pretty good. If the defense can take a big step forward, then yeah, this team could actually win this division. So, Steele, thoughts on Virginia Tech to wrap them up?
Two quick stats.
Yeah.
Their defense last year gave up 6.4 yards per play. Pretty embarrassing. Worst.
Is that bad?
It's not good. And then on offense, it didn't seem that they won first down very often because I'm reading here 55% of their third downs were 3rd and 7 or longer.
It's not good.
112th in FBS.
It's not good.
Not many teams thrive with 3rd and long.
Yeah.
Even if you're Navy or whoever.
Sure.
Not many teams can convert 3rd and 7 religiously, inconsistently. So, I'm starting to jump off the Fuente bandwagon. He's averaging 5 losses per year. He's 25-15 there, and he's only been there 3 years, and he's regressed every year in terms of total win-loss record. So I think he could very easily find a hot seat at the end of the year, but I'm not sure in terms of, I guess, staff or whatever you want to call it, administration,
right,
if they would be willing to get rid of him or eat the contract or whatever the situation is there. But not the division winner this year, in my opinion.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a few minutes, but we'll move on to the next program, the defending Coastal, right? We're on the Coastal? Yeah,
Coastal,
defending
yeah.
Coastal champions, the Pitt Panthers, with Pat Narduzzi, legendary head coach. I don't really want to talk about Pitt, so Steele, do you want to go, I guess?
Nah, Pitt sucks.
Okay, Corey, anything on Pitt?
They're just tricky to play when you play them at Hines.
Yeah.
And they're just,
the wind is just swirling.
they're just weird.
Okay.
They're not good though.
Corey, we're gonna kind of rely on you for these other coastal teams. If you want to give just like a quick breakdown, like what do you think about Pitt this year? Are they a contender at all?
Kenny Pickett.
I mean, I can't rule them out considering they won. But I certainly wouldn't put my money on them. I think they're in a situation sort of like UVA, but with a worse defense. It's funny how Narduzzi's been. He's been there. I don't know how many years now, but he hasn't come close to fielding anything remotely even approaching the Michigan State defenses that he put on the field. So it's a strange dynamic there. And then on offense, they're losing I think they had 2,000-yard rushers, and they're both gone. Plus, I think 3, maybe 4 on the offensive line. So you're looking at a situation, again, like UVA, where a lot of weight is going to be put on quarterbacks' shoulders. And unlike UVA, you don't have a guy who can run around and make plays with his feet all that much. Kenny Pickett. So, there's some question marks for sure, particularly offensively for Pitt.
Yeah. Addison, just quickly, are they a contender?
Because like pretty much everyone is, I guess. But no, I think there's a drop off from the top 3 teams.
I agree.
Those losses that Corey mentioned, they did lose a ton in the run game with the O-line, 2 running backs. That's a lot to overcome, and that the running game is what they hung their hat on last year. They were really good running the football last year. So that much loss, in the running game, was too much.
All right, we'll move on to the next program in the division. We kind of talked about them just a little bit. North Carolina with Mac Brown here, obviously. They're coming off back-to-back 9-loss seasons. Corey, quick breakdown on North Carolina, or just to keep relying on you. Are they a surprise contender, or are they definitely maybe a year or 2 away?
Yeah, definitely not a contender. I think of all the teams, I can rule them and Georgia Tech out as for sure not going to be contending for the division. I think it's a number of factors. One, particularly on defense, they were atrocious against the run last year, and I don't see anything, at least based on what I was reading earlier, that they were going to replace that and magically become a lot better there. And offensively, they very well could be starting a true freshman, so at quarterback, and Sam Howell. So you don't typically have a lot of, if you're a meddling 2-8 team, 2-9 team, whatever they were last year, starting a true freshman is probably not going to be like the guy carrying the flag in year 1.
Yeah.
Like how this magazine has record at school 69, 46, and 1, 10 years. Because they are counting his old record.
Yeah. Right. Any thoughts for you on Mac and his team this year? Are they just bowl eligible maybe, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, cusp of bowl eligibility perhaps. I mean, like I said earlier, I think in terms of coaching and like improving the talent that is on the roster currently, I don't think there's any debate that Mac Brown is a better coach than Larry Fedora. So I mean, in terms of like improving what he has there, and like Corey said, that he'll be able to probably snag a top tier recruit here and there on like what Fedora really did.
Right.
If he's able to mold a couple of those guys in there, you could see him on the verge of bowl eligibility this year or even next year. But contending for the ACC level, the Coastal, no thanks.
Addison, North Carolina shit.
Duke,
moving ahead.
same thing.
Yeah, I think when you get to this point in the division, we're talking about teams that really don't have a chance, in the division. But to show you how crazy this division was last year, North Carolina being a 2-win team beat the division champs.
Okay.
So, just weird division, but
I'll just go right back to you now.
Yeah.
Duke Blue Devils, they lose NFL first-round draft choice Daniel Jones. Are they... So, you just said it. Like this is not a contender. Do we really need to talk about them? I don't know.
Yeah.
Duke.
I think the backup actually played a little bit last year.
Looks like
and did all right. So, but losing someone like Daniel Jones at a program like Duke is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And they actually haven't been that great in conference play the last few years.
Right.
So, and I don't really see that changing either.
Well, and they also draw. I mean, I know we're just talking about where they fit in the division, but they got to play Alabama and Notre Dame this year, so they're going to get their asses kicked a lot, I think. But I don't know, Corey. Do you want to say anything about Duke, or should we just move on quickly to Georgia Tech and then?
Pretty sure Duke pretty much just beat Notre Dame. I
don't have much to say. I think Duke also lost 2 pretty key linebackers, Humphreys, I think, and Joe Giles Harris. So that could be.
Yeah.
I mean, those were 2 studs on their defense that basically
like
were Captain America.
line, though. Whatever.
Yeah. So Georgia Tech. I mean, do we think they're probably going to finish in the basement just due to schematic change, Addison?
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty drastic change. So. You kind of don't
hope for the best.
throw away this season. I remember Phil said Jeff Collins likes their receivers though. He's pumping out their receivers. Do either of you guys have any on Georgia Tech before we move on to the Atlantic?
No.
I just don't think they're ever going to get the ball to the receivers because every single one of their offensive linemen has never blocked ever.
Fact. Yeah, fact. All right, yeah. So
they're going to be running actual pass plays.
Yeah, we'll get to our Coastal Division champs in a minute here, but we're going to move on to the Atlantic since we're getting closer to an hour. We'll start with the defending national champions, Clemson Tigers. They obviously return a shit ton of production. They lose a good amount of the defensive line, but it seems like they just have a lot of guys they're going to plug back in. Steele, since your team got to play him last year, as did Corey's, I think, but what do you think about Clemson this year? Are they I know they're the overwhelming favorite in this conference. I mean, are we sitting here like pretty much writing them into the playoff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much, because nobody from the Coastal is going to contend with them on the crossover games or even in the ACC championship.
Yeah.
So typically, like you would see in the SEC or even in the Big Ten, usually that conference championship game is going to be, of a team of your same caliber, and that's not the same thing because Clemson's just on their own footing and eons and heads above the other team. I wouldn't honestly be shocked if they won every game by 20 plus points this year.
They could be favored by that much.
Yeah, or
at least in the ACC.
We've seen in the last couple of years though they've had like a game or two where they just kind of struggle. Whether it's like I think Syracuse
a couple times
with Kelly Bryant's injury.
A&M played them pretty tough last year.
Yeah.
I believe, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's always that potential letdown game, but I think their talent exceeds everyone by a far wide margin as well.
Right.
So even if they have a letdown game, I still see them kind of coasting through this year.
Addison, any additional thoughts? I mean, is this like a cinch playoff team, or I'm not seeing you have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to see them not making the playoff.
Yeah.
I think like it's possible their 2 toughest games might be out of conference games.
I was gonna say A&M for sure.
A&M and at South Carolina to end the year. Although Syracuse has given them tough games the past 2 years, and the Dome is tricky.
Mm-hmm.
But they lose their whole D line. But what's crazy is that they're going to have probably one of the top D lines again.
Yeah.
Even though this team has recruited like unlike any other team on the D line, and this year they're going to get this recruiting class they've got coming in this upcoming year is just insane right now.
Yeah.
So, even with the big losses there, they had so much depth that I don't think it's going to even matter. They're still going to be elite.
They all got reps in 2 playoff games.
Well, here's the funny thing about it too is we haven't yet mentioned the offense, which might be the best in the nation. We haven't time mentioned.
I was going to actually ask the question: who people think is better offensively, them or Bama?
I mean.
Clemson.
It's pretty close.
I
think Clemson
I would say Clemson
I give Clemson
too.
the edge right now. Yeah, I think Lawrence is better than Tua. So I mean,
and
Tua is good, but I think
Etienne, and Alabama doesn't have an Etienne in the backfield.
Right. Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
They're very good. Corey, this is a playoff team, right? I mean, is there anything else really to say about them?
Yeah, get the Sharpie out. Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's move on then to the. I guess we know our pick for the division or the conference too, but let's move on to. Interesting program. Florida State Seminoles, second year of the Willie Taggart era. It started off, pretty terribly last year. They were dreadful on offense. Defense, I think the defense was talented, but they were on the field so damn much that I think it was hard for them to really put up good statistical numbers. Steele, this was a team that you felt like could surprise last year.
Yeah.
Win the division possibly. They but they obviously didn't do that. Are they going to make big strides this year? What do you think about the Knowles?
Yeah, I was unaware of the issues they had on offensive line last year. I think they had a couple of injuries in camp, and then they had guys playing offensive line that just didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
So obviously, we all know that you have to win in the trenches to obviously give your quarterback time to make some plays, and just kind of collapsed from there. I think Willie, he showed that he can at least win. I don't know how great of a coach or recruiter he is, but he could win in, the programs that he was at previously, or at least South Florida.
Yeah.
So we kind of thought that the ties in the Florida region would help with recruiting. That to be determined. I think this class they didn't sign like a single skill position player or something ridiculous like that.
Not the best.
So I don't know. It could go from ugly to really ugly and hot seat type of zone if he doesn't turn it around quick. I think they also still have questions at quarterback. Correct?
Yeah, I guess it's a good transition. It's funny because they got Wisconsin transfer Alex Hornibrook in. I am convinced that he went there just because there are no good-looking girls, maybe in Madison apparently. But he went to. You would think these guys that are transferring are going somewhere with like not a guarantee to start, but like a really good shot. And it seems like our guy Thinman, James Blackman, is looking like definitely the starter from what I've read. Corey, I don't know if you read anything different, but I'm pretty sure Blackman's going to be the starter. But
yeah, front runner for sure.
Yeah, but even though they were pretty bad last year, they do return 8 on both sides of the ball. They have a lot of talent on paper. I didn't love Willie in game as a coach. I didn't think he put his kids in a good position to win a lot of the time. Now that might be him the first year kind of weeding out the kids that aren't buying in. Phil Steele claims they've bought in now. He seems to talk to every coach every year somehow. I don't know, if that's how true that is or not. But I mean, I don't know about you, Addison. I think game 1 against Boise, who I think should be decent again this year. I think it could be pretty telling to see like how much effort there is from Florida State. If they put a little bit of a thumping on Boise, maybe we have like a team that could surprise a little bit here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm definitely interested in that week 1 game just to see if things are different. Corey definitely gets credit last year because some of us expected a bounce back from Florida State from the year before, and Corey cautioned us about getting excited about Willie Taggart. And, that was a good call because the coaching looked really bad last year.
Yeah.
It just because they looked like they were lost a lot of the time. There were stupid mistakes, penalties. It just did not look like a very organized team. And the offensive line was one of the worst that I can remember.
Yeah, it was trash.
And it makes me wonder why someone like Hornibrook, what quarterback would want to transfer to a place where the O-line play was that shitty?
Girls. Tallahassee girls. I told you why.
But I also didn't know that Blackman is that much of the front runner. It seems like I've seen more talk about Hornibrook.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm pretty sure Blackman's starting. Yeah.
But I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
That's encouraging.
Does it matter? Yeah.
I mean,
who would want to play behind this O-line?
No, you're
I don't
right.
know.
Yeah.
Like Cam Akers is a good talent, but
Yeah,
he had nowhere to run either.
Right.
So I don't know. Like there's a lot of talent, but now after seeing 2 years in a row, just the way they've looked, now I have to question it. Like I think they quit at the end of the year too. It got pretty bad.
They did. Do you think there's going to be like significant improvement with this team this year? Do you think they're going to be kind of middle of the road again?
I expect improvement, but that could still mean just like 7 wins.
Not a contender though, right?
Yeah, definitely not close.
Corey, what do you think about the Knowles this year? I mean, I guess I'll ask you right now. Do you think Willie Taggart's going to be the coach after this year?
I gotta start with something first.
Yeah.
Boise ain't ready, boys. So that was a tweet. There's a beat writer that said that a wide receiver catching a pass on day 1 of camp, probably in shorts, doing a one-on-one or maybe a skeleton on air, caught a touchdown and yelled, "Boise ain't ready." So I'll take Boise in whatever amount of points they're gonna give me.
Yeah.
At least he knows they're playing Boise.
Yes.
They're focused, Corey.
But no, I'm selling hard. Willie Taggart, I still maintain, is a bad coach, not Power 5 quality, at least certainly not Power 5 blue blood Florida State quality. So yeah, as long as he's there, I'm not confident in them doing anything with any amount of talent that they might bring in.
Okay, yeah, we'll move on then to the next program. Syracuse Orange, who I think surprised a little bit last year with 10 wins with our guy Dino Babers. And, they, like we've alluded to, they've given Clemson a couple tough games the last couple years, but it seems like this year, media, a lot of publications got them around 20 to 25. Steele, do you think that's fitting, or do you think this is an overrated football team this year?
Fake good.
Fake good.
They were fake good last year. Notre Dame dismantled them.
Exposed.
They exposed them at Yankee Stadium. As we all know, that Notre Dame wouldn't play them in the
Well,
dome.
they're not going to play the dome. Yeah, they refuse to do that.
No, I think like you said, I think Dino Babers is our guy. I think we all like his mentality, his coaching
Babers
style. Them losing Dungy's obviously the biggest thing. I'm not quite sure what they have in terms of quarterback depth, in terms of coming back. But they're gonna have to replace that productivity. I mean, Dungy was always hurt, so I'm sure if the guy behind him returns, then they should obviously have some returning production because, like I said, Dungy was dinged up most of his career.
Right.
So, I mean, as far as contend, we all know that they're not going to contend for the ACC title, but we like what they're not a mockery. I mean, they're not a terrible program anymore. They're consistently competing and winning games, opposed to just having to lug up to Syracuse, New York to win the game and then get out of there.
Right.
Like people just exactly dreading that trip.
Yeah.
So.
It looks like DeVito actually, I think that's how you pronounce it. It looks like he actually played pretty well in relief a couple times last year. They do bring back 7 on defense from a defense that I don't believe was that good. But I don't know. I think they'll be okay. I kind of think Clemson might hand it to them this year, but maybe they're a surprise contender. Addison, what do you think about Syracuse? If I guess that is the game that matters.
They play them fairly early too.
Yeah, they do play them early.
And it's homecoming.
And I think it is actually after Clemson plays A&M, which I don't know, maybe Clemson comes off like an ass beating a good team, and
it's Syracuse's home opener 3 weeks into the season too.
Mm-hmm.
They play at Liberty.
Yeah,
like that right there tells you that this isn't a serious program, right? But I think they're definitely going to compete for second in the division because that's what everyone else is playing for.
Right.
Dino, since he's been there, they've always been competitive for the most part. It took a while for it to reflect record-wise. Last year, obviously, the big jump. They seem good every year for like one upset or like giving a highly ranked team a scare.
I like betting them as dogs.
Yeah, me too, especially in the dome.
Right.
So, I don't know. I didn't think they were obviously
Week 3. You'll have your opportunity.
I thought they were solid last year, not like an elite team or anything. I mean, how high did they get ranked last year? Like 12.
12 before Notre Dame handed it.
Yeah, I never thought they were that good. Like Steele said, fake good.
Right.
But so I think again solid. I wouldn't really say top 25, but
Corey, Q's, do you think they're a legit top 25 team? Obviously, we know they're competing for second in the division, but what do you think about them?
I mean, I think they could sneak their way into somewhere between like 18th and 25th by the time the season's all said and done. I'm not quite sure what their out-of-conference looks like or their crossover games.
They play at the Terps.
They play at Maryland week 2. Crossover, they've got, looks like Pitt at home, at Duke.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
out of conference.
Still outside of Clemson, it's not that difficult.
It's not that bad. Yeah.
Out of conference is pretty dreadful. They play Holy Cross.
8-win team, maybe even 9-win team again. So they could sneak into like a bottom of the barrel,
Sure.
18 to 25. I love Dino. I think I would have as much the lack of faith I have in Willie Taggart. I have exactly opposite of that, and actual faith in Dino to do stuff with not as much talent. And there's a lot of hype coming around their defensive line, which I guess maybe I didn't pay enough attention, but I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, Phil says one of the top lines in the ACC this year. So yeah, maybe they'll cause some havoc and maybe they'll surprise us all again. But we'll move on to the next program, NC State Wolfpack. I mean, they're kind of quietly coming off of 2 9-win seasons, I think.
Definitely very quiet last year, 9 wins. Yeah.
They, I guess, Corey, we'll start with you. Are the Wolfpack a legit contender for the second position in this division? Are they kind of similar to like Hughes, where maybe they could sneak into that top 25, or do you think a little bit less of them?
I think I don't know much about them. All I know is
I don't either.
Ryan Finley's gone. I know that they lost a couple of like Swiss Army knife offensive players as well, like skill guys. So I'm not sure where they're going to go replacing that. And I couldn't tell you one thing about their defense. They're just like you said, they're a sleepy, like under the radar team that, I don't know, maybe they beat up on a crappy ACC schedule and racked up some wins. But if they get to 9 wins again this year, I would probably be surprised.
They caught someone's attention by winning 9 games because the latest video we saw was a player rolling up to their camp in a Rolls Royce. So somebody got paid by winning 9 games at NC State, or something to that effect, at least. I mean, somebody noticed it and paid up.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Corey said, Ryan
should delete that video.
Yeah. Wait, whoops.
Yeah.
Probably his summer internship job at the car dealership.
Yep.
But yeah, not much to say about NC State. Just a middle of the road team.
We just know they pay their players in cars, apparently. Addison, any thoughts before we move on to BC?
They got cleaned up pretty good offensively.
Yeah.
Defensively, last year they were pretty solid.
They're actually good, yeah.
Despite losing their whole D line, which was
very good.
The cornerstone of their D the year before. So they returned like a pretty good amount on D. So the defense could be pretty good again.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to BC. They lose a lot on defense. They bring back A.J. Dillon, bring back their quarterback who was not very good, Anthony Brown, but he could throw it down the field. They actually did have somewhat of a vertical passing game.
All about the play action.
Yeah, mega play action. Steve Adazio, obviously, his teams were going to play like tough, like physically, but they're going to be deprived of talent. Steele, I mean, you guys play them always. Thoughts on BC? Yeah, you do play them this year.
Do we?
Yeah, they're at South Bend, November 23rd.
Whatever.
Yeah.
They suck.
Yeah.
They suck.
They suck. Okay.
They're wait, is their offensive coordinator gone, Corey? Did they get rid of what's his name?
Yeah, so they lost both coordinators. Their offensive coordinator, Scott Leffler, is now the head coach at our...
at BG.
Oh, so they might be back. So they might be back.
They might be back because he's terrible.
Yeah, oh my God, he's
Yeah.
terrible. But yeah, I think A.J. Dillon's obviously a tremendous back, and it looks like they returned 1 lineman?
Yeah.
2, maybe?
Maybe.
So I will remain to be seen if they can, get a consistent run game going, because that's obviously what's going to open up the play action pass is what they had the most success with Anthony Brown, throwing it downfield for them. I don't think they're hauling in good recruiting, so clearly they're not going to be contending with the big dogs.
Addison, BC, thoughts?
They always seem to run the ball really well. So they need Dillon to be healthy all year. That's really key for them. That he wasn't 100% last year, missed a few games.
Yeah.
Like Steele mentioned, there's a lot to replace on the O-line. Steve Adazio is regarded as a really good O-line coach, so I think a lot of people give him the benefit of doubt there a little bit.
Yeah.
But still, there's work to do, and they need to be able to run the ball well.
Yeah. Corey, any thoughts on BC before we move on to Wake?
Yeah, just quickly, I think you guys have talked about the offense and how, A.J. Dillon needs to stay healthy. But defensively, they lost both ends, and they're both pretty good ends. last year, and they lost like everything on the back end. So if you can't rush the passer and you can't stop the pass, like they could be behind quite a bit and frequently. And running the ball behind 300-pound A.J. Dillon 3 yards every carry is not going to catch up. So they could find themselves in a world of trouble if they're playing from behind a lot.
Yeah, they're gonna suck. Let's move on to Wake. I'll start because I actually think this could be a little bit of a surprise team within this division. Yeah.
Someone's got thoughts on Wake.
No, I've read a little bit on them for some reason. I don't remember why, but yeah, I think their offense will actually be decent. The defense should be healthier. They were quite injured last year, but I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to spice up the rest of this division. I'm going to say that Wake finishes actually third in this division this year, just because I want to. Corey, any thoughts on Wake? Are they going to be trash, and I'm completely wrong about that, or what do you think?
I think I might have missed that page, or it was glued together with some of the other pages, because I could not tell you anything about Wake in
Okay.
terms of being good, bad, or
Right.
A potential quarterback
I know they've gotten
controversy.
a little hype.
So the odds makers have. See, Phil had Jamie Newman as projected starter. I saw Vegas has Sam Hartman at minus 500 now. If you watch QB1 on Netflix, Sam Hartman was one of the quarterbacks in one of the seasons.
Okay.
He was decent when he played last year.
Yeah. Newman won 3 out of his 4 starts.
Right.
In relief.
Yeah. So, but Phil says Hartman is a gym rat and film junkie. So, I mean, he got that going for him, I guess. Steele, do we care about Wake?
No.
Okay.
Cade Carney is a good Swiss Army knife type of utility player,
Yeah.
and I could see him playing for the Pats one day.
Okay. Addison, any thoughts on Wake before we move on to, I guess, Louisville? Nah.
I don't really care.
Okay. Louisville, they're going to be really, really bad. Does anybody have anything to say about Louisville? Okay. So
they might lose by 30 a game instead of 50.
yeah,
they should be better, but still bad.
Improved.
I'll say this. I will know a little bit more about Scott Satterfield as far as who he puts out quarterback game one, because anybody is better than Juwan Puma Pass. So if he puts Pass out there, then I think he's probably just a bad coach.
They're doing a blackout for the Notre Dame game. I'm very scared.
Yeah, well, their funeral. So yeah, let's move on to the last part of the pod where we make our division picks and then our conference champion. I think you guys by now have an idea of who we're going to pick to win the conference, but Steele, I'll start with you. Atlantic Division, I know you got Clemson. Who do you got playing Clemson and losing to them?
Who said I had Clemson?
Oh, I mean, yeah, shock the world by all means, yeah.
No, Clemson obviously, and then out of the Coastal, I am going to go with.
I will point out that Phil has Clemson with the 12th ranked special teams unit in the conference. Just saying.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go.
Doesn't matter.
I'm gonna go with
Missed field goal to lose a game.
Yeah.
Still spinning the wheel of destiny right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Are you flipping pages, man? Flipping a coin.
I'm gonna go with an actual semi-shocker here, and I'm gonna call for Pitt to repeat.
Wow, that is a kind of a shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Any reason in particular for that?
Because I think Kenny Pickett is probably one of the best quarterbacks in that division.
Oh, okay. All right. So we got Clemson beating Pitt again.
Yep.
And probably by more than what they beat them by last time, I would say.
Yeah.
Addison, I'll go to you next. Your Atlantic and Coastal champs, and then your conference champ.
Clemson, and I'm going Miami.
Okay.
Although I think a lot of different scenarios could play out in that division, like we mentioned. It's always very unpredictable.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I'll go, and then I'll let Corey go last. I'm going to go with Clemson, obviously, and then I didn't really know up until about right now, but I'm going to go with Miami. I think their front seven is going to be pretty nasty, and I think they'll do just enough offensively within this division. I would not be shocked if Virginia Tech, Virginia, Pitt, if they won this division. But like I said, I kind of favor Miami and Virginia Tech, and I like Miami coming off a bye playing Virginia Tech at home, so I'm going to give them a slight edge there. Corey, your division champs and your probably obvious conference champion.
Yeah, I kind of let out with it early on when I said I like Miami as the front runner in that division. I will say that I reserve the right to amend my pick if, and in fact, Tate Martell starts week 1 and throws 3 picks against Florida.
He
but
might.
yeah, I think they're the most talented team, the best defense, and probably the most skill offensively too, outside of quarterback. So,
Okay.
given all that, I mean, as long as they don't totally shit the bed, they're probably the easy pick.
Okay, so once again, we have pretty much a unanimous conference champion. When we started the Pac-12, we all had Oregon. Big 12, we all had Oklahoma. SEC, we all have Alabama. ACC, we all have Clemson. So next pod, we will wrap up the Power 5 conferences with the Big 10, which I would say we are probably going to have some different picks in each of those divisions and possibly different conference champions. So that one could be pretty interesting.
But I think that one's the most up in the air.
Yeah, it's interesting. But once we get through that conference, then the last preseason pod will be our kind of like quick national preview, possible surprise playoff contenders, who we actually have in our individual quartets, and then obviously our national champions. We'll get into our Heisman winners, some Heisman dark horse candidates, and then we'll get into the weekly schedule when we preview the biggest games. We do our betting previews. I think when we do the national preview, we'll also go over maybe like some future stuff, like some win totals, like
should look at some futures.
Upcoming week 0 and week 1 bets. So yeah, we got some good stuff to look forward to. But that'll wrap up the ACC and Notre Dame pod. So till next time.